The year is 1988. Scott Baio is everyone's favorite babysitter. Jay Leno is selling Doritos. Short Circuit 2 hits theaters. We were all getting rickrolled and didn't even know it. And the Atari 7800 gets the arcade hit Donkey Kong on its 7800 Super System console. Yes, 7 years after this great platformer hits the arcades, it arrives in the homes of 7800 owners. The better late than never mantra could never be tested with such commitment. Okay, so having covered the 2600 and Intellivision ports, it's time to move on to one that actually has the ability to be much more true to the arcade version. I would have liked to have covered the ColecoVision port here, as that's often touted as the best of the pre-NES era. But alas, we are not going to see any ColecoVision reviews on this channel anytime soon. The reason? I don't own the console, and I'm not currently looking to acquire one. And while the NES/Famicom version of this game was published before the one I'm covering today, 1983/86 respectively, I find it more useful to showcase the 7800 port first. As usual, I have some background viewing for you, and for this title, I recommend the No Swear Gamer's review of this game. While I agree with many of his viewpoints on this title, we differ slightly on a few key points. I have to say that so I don't obsolete my content before we actually get into the review. Anyway, link in the description. Check it out. The basics. Alright, we've been over the Donkey Kong basics for 2 full episodes already. Run, jump, climb, smash, avoid the bad things, collect the good things, ascend, pull the rivets. You know the drill by now. Quite self-explanatory at this point in time. This 7800 title works with pretty much any of the joystick/D-pad 7800 compatible controllers out there. Proline, CX40, Genesis, heck, even the 2600 trackball in joystick mode, although that last one isn't exactly recommended. You may remember from my review of Pole Position 2 for this 7800 that the Genesis controller was a no-no, but it's all good here, which is music to my hands. Overview. This is the first port of Donkey Kong that I've covered that includes the spring stage. Still no Pies or Cement Factory, but we have achieved a slightly longer loop, which delays the sensation of monotony that the 2600 and Intellivision versions just can't do. My youthful experience. This is a port of Donkey Kong I had never played in my youth, but I would have loved it. It's a very well-made home experience of the arcade game. Plays pretty well, looks pretty good, and sounds... Oh. But it is fun. It's not arcade perfect, but it is a great leap forward from the previous versions we've covered. Aside from the NES port, review coming soon, it's the best home port that tries to be true to the arcade that I've played. It captures the essence of the arcade very well, and is absolutely a game I would have played on a regular basis as a youngster, if it had been in my home at the time. The look. Jumpman looks great. Donkey Kong, by far the best sprite of the brute we've come across so far. Pauline looks good, doing the classic waist wiggle, but doesn't scream for help. The fireballs and barrels look good. Pauline's items are looking good. Background, platforms, ladders, the oil drum. This game nails the aesthetics. The 7800's most impressive feature, in my opinion, is its ability to handle numerous sprites at one time, without lag or sprite flicker. And while this game doesn't show that off to its ultimate potential, if you play on the expert setting, you'll be able to see some of the madness in action. Of course, with so much barrel spam, you'll have to be pretty skilled to appreciate it for more than a few seconds. The animation frames are good, just like pretty much anything else. I don't have any complaints about the appearance. All the standalone components look good and they combine together seamlessly. The look is good. The sound. The audio is, to me, one of the biggest downsides of this port. I feel like I know what they tried to do, that being to recreate the ditties and jingles from the game as accurately as possible. And tone for tone, note for note, this was moderate success in my opinion. But the TIA chip is not famous for its sound output. And a lot of the lower notes are much better suited for sound effects, not so much for carrying a melody. There are certainly points where it sounds like an oboe is replaced with a whoopee cushion, and in this way it can be quite off-putting. I will say, however, the longer that I played this game, the less it caused my ears to bleed. So perhaps an acclimation period isn't unreasonable. It never got to the point where I found the music good, but it became tolerable as I became desensitized. That said, if you don't have the patience to acclimate to it, the game still plays fine while muted. So for some of you, that may be an option. The sound effects are acceptable, it's just the songs that just don't sit right with me. It's not bad enough to deter me from recommending this port, but I cannot give the audio a good rating here. It's just too... The sound is not a selling point of this port. I mentioned in my 2600 review of this game that they implemented the less is more strategy for the sound, and in my opinion, produced a better audio experience because of it. Gameplay. The gameplay is solid. Movement and jump physics feel great. Climbing the ladders has a bit more precision than would be ideal, but absolutely acceptable. The maximum fall height without taking a death is a bit cruel, but that is pretty universal across all platforms this game appears on. It's just more noticeable in this version as it's the first one in my review series to contain the spring stage, the one where you're most likely to fall from a great variety of heights. My biggest complaint with the controls is dismounting the ladders. You must be certain to be all the way up, or down, before you can traverse horizontally. Buffering a diagonal just makes Jumpman freeze in place. Again, this is not uncommon for ports of Donkey Kong, but this is one aspect where I'd like the home port to show a little benevolence. Just a personal preference, but I feel like hardcore DK gamers have the arcade cabinets or MAME to go to, and the home port could just be a little kinder in this regard. I understand that it's a relic reminiscent of the time, and this criticism is only really applicable in the more recent times, as opposed to when it was actually published. But I said it. And it's not a serious gripe either. Like, after a little bit of gaming, you become aware of this, and can learn to deal with it. While it is easy to regress and forget, it's not so bad that it makes the 7800 experience of Donkey Kong a bad one. If you can overcome this, which you probably can without too much of a time commitment, I think you'll find the controls and gameplay to be excellent. As usual, the hammers will only smash the enemy if the animation frame hits it, and you're exposed when raising it in the air. Jumpman swings the hammer much faster in this port than our previous reviewed versions of Donkey Kong, so this shouldn't happen too frequently. I managed to die in this manner a few times in the short period I recorded the gameplay for this review, but it still should be rare, at least on the standard and advanced difficulties. At expert, the barrels really speed up. One could say they barrel down on you. Moving on. The title screen presents you with 3 difficulty options and 1 or 2 player options. For what it's worth, I didn't really notice all that much difference between standard and advanced, but expert does indeed crank up the insanity. 2-player mode is alternating, although you could probably deduce that for yourself if you have any familiarity with the game. Oh, and for the first time in one of my Donkey Kong reviews, the first barrel crashes into the oil drum. And ignition occurs. Inflammable means flammable? What a country! That's the feature I've been anticipating for a few reviews now. Excellent. The 1-player experience. Well, as I mentioned, the 2-player option is alternating, so aside from waiting for the other player to finish their turn, there's no significant variance between 1 and 2-player action. Who would like this? I'm undecided. It's really good for its time, but not quite as good as the NES port. A port that is available in many, many forms today. I think given the option of just those two, the NES will win out among gamers over and over. But this one's still good. Very good. If for some quirk of probability you have the ability to play this port and not the NES port, it will fill your itch to hop barrels very well. I think most fans of Donkey Kong will find this port enjoyable, but it is unlikely to be your favorite. Still, when the competition is the actual arcade cabinet, or main, and the NES version, this one holds its own, but the earplugs aren't included. Relevance today. Donkey Kong has a robust following and presence in the modern day, but interest is disproportionately skewed, for valid reasons, toward the arcade version. It remains one of the most prestigious high-score grinds in classic gaming, and because of this, home consoles tend to be overlooked. When they do get attention, the NES seems to get all the glory. Again, for valid reasons. However, if you ever have an opportunity, give this version a shot. It doesn't have much to offer that the better ones don't, but if you can appreciate it for what it is and how close it measures up to the NES port, you may just have a lot of fun with this one. Overall, this is a very, very solid home rendition of the classic arcade. It looks good, it plays good, it suffers a bit in the sound department, but that is a console limitation and by no means ruins the gaming experience. I like this port of this game, and anytime my 7800 is hooked up, I'll be sure to give it a few plays. It obliterates the Intellivision port and is slightly less redundant than the 2600 port, and it looks far superior to both. Next, we're getting close to the end of these Donkey Kong reviews. It sure will be nice to finally play something different, but we aren't there just quite yet. So be sure to tune in next time as Jumpman's adventures continue. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you next mission.